We're on item 11, page 90. Natasha, welcome.
Kia ora, good morning.
We'll take the report as read, and is there anything else you'd like to add? We'll take the report as read. Is there anything else you wish to bring to our attention?
No.
We're on page 90.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm fine.
So I'll move, seconded by Councillor Leo. Question, Councillor Angela.
Thank you. Sure, Lance. So the option that you're recommending is to defer the construction of the path, and is it also to review the Hamilton City River Plan?
I would like to take the projects that the master plan has identified to a briefing, just to look at where we might want to prioritise those. So there might be some things in there that provide benefits in the near term. We may be able to get funding partners involved, and also just to understand what the costing is. So it's just to look at those. I mean, at the moment, nothing's funded, so beyond what we've got. So
okay,
it's just
and get a bit of direction from elected members on that too.
Okay, so this is the Hamilton City River Plan, not just a portion, not something for the pathway, which is out of the 1.25 million from the annual plan.
It's that master plan that there was a briefing on in April, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And that list of projects we had that were funded through the capital we had in the budget. So there was a list of projects, and originally Gina presented them when she was here, and the task force worked on them, and then they sort of got refined down. So it's just now that we're sort of finding that this walkway is costing a lot of money that we can't afford, we haven't got the budget for at the moment. It's just to sort of regroup and say where are we at, and obviously we're giving you updates here, but just to refresh that, and then just get some direction from there.
And part of the recommendation says allocates 25,000 of the river plan VOTR to Embassy Park to developing staging options for the River Plan Master Plan. What's the River Plan Master Plan? We're interchanging things, and I get confused.
Sorry, the River Plan Master Plan is that presentation where you had the fly through that showed a lot of different paths and connections, and that is the same thing that I'm talking about. So what that is you recall that there's potential for the paths that go all the way through to the museum and then down to the jetty. As
part of the Hamilton City River Plan?
That's the river, yes.
So which is unfunded. The Embassy to VOTR to Embassy is funded?
Part funded, yes.
Part funded?
Yes.
So this is 25,000, although you say VOTR to Embassy, from that 1.25 million.
So that comes out of the 400. So we've got 400,000 set aside for the path between, and so of that 400, which is the only bit that's sort of not completely committed to the jetty at this point in time, of that 400, I'm requesting 25,000 be used towards understanding if we do projects at different timings, what the staging is, and just reviewing the costs on those.
From the Hamilton City River Plan. So this is not this is part of that work.
As part of the...
If we want with the review, if we want to go ahead, if the elected members say, I quite like this one to come first, this one and this one, is that what that 25,000? It's not a new, so you're calling it a master plan. It's actually just, it's staging, staging options for the River Plan master plan.
Correct.
What's the River Plan master plan?
So the River Plan, we did a master plan for the what we called the cultural precinct, which went from where the Ferrybank development plan completed through to Victoria on the river, and that was the work that the architects Rate and Athfield presented on, showing a number of connections, the bridge coming over the river, those paths that go down to the jetty.
And the fly through and all of that.
Yeah, that. So so when you talk about the Hamilton City River Plan,
that was the original.
Yes. Okay. So I am talking about this element that the landscape architects have just provided. So it's focusing on the CBD area of that.
Okay. So it kind of sits under the Hamilton. Well, it does sit under the Hamilton.
It is part of the river plan, but it is a sub.
As long as we're not I mean, not, you know, everything needs a review. I
Yeah.
understand that. So I just needed to get that 100% clear in my head. So option one, which page? You're saying that there are, on page 92, that there are, with option one, that there are potential savings to be done if we design the path concurrently with the theatre. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, but in the recommendation, you're recommending to not do that.
Correct. What's happening with it is that the theatre levels are changing. So
Yeah.
we did some design, and the levels just changed in July. So we're going to need to redo that if that's what we want to do. One way to manage that would be to hand that over to the architects for the theatre project, and let them manage that. That approach might result in some savings, particularly in the construction side of things, not necessarily in the design, but maybe that we can, you know, attach the work that we're doing as part of the theatre. However, I think we just need to review where we're at, given the costs that we've got, the gaps in funding that we have, just to confirm through briefing that we're going in the right.
But we wouldn't go ahead with option one in spite of whatever level the final, the theatre says the final connection path would be anyway, would we?
Correct. Yeah.
So aren't we just sort of in a holding pattern? We continue with the work, we're in a holding pattern, we're not actually deferring it?
So the resolution at this stage was to defer construction until we came back for this. So I'm just reiterating that.
So if we've got a resolution on the board to do that, surely the only new thing you're asking us for is to allocate 25,000 from that budget, 1.25 million, for staging options.
That's largely correct. That I'm just being a little bit pedantic with the wording because the original resolution was to defer until staff reported back in August. So I'm just getting a continuation of the deferral.
I'm wondering if we cannot do that a bit better. I might have a think about that wording because I just don't. Obviously, staff, you're going to continue working with the theatre architects and Momentum, and at some point, irrespective of anything with Central City Park or anything else, we want that connection. So we're not going to be losing that resolution, that decision at all. You're going to just probably have to continue to come back to council with those kinds of updates. I'm just concerned that we've got a resolution on the board that's quite clear. How much of a difference is this one to?
Well, it's a continuation of what's stated in 11 from the previous resolution, but it's basically that we're not going to start carrying on doing a whole lot more geotech work for a project that we don't have money to complete. And we're saying that we need to come back and actually regroup and actually at a briefing and then actually look at what are the priorities around those river plan, those master plan projects for that VOTR to embassy part of that area.
Okay, right, okay. Thanks.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just to follow on from that line of questioning, if I might, which is a little bit clearer. So this further work, VOTR to embassy, would exclude what has come to be known as the Central City, because Councillor O'Leary's right, there's a little bit of interchangeability with language. Some people call it Central City River Plan, which is not actually a formal title. This would exclude that. This is the one that the public adopted, the river plan the public adopted, and the work that we did under the chairmanship of Councillor Gallagher is it?
That's correct, although the Central City Park River Plan proposal has some influence on when and what you might do, but we can cover that when we get to the briefing and put that in the mix. But it's not proposing to review that, it's just looking at the impact that might have on different options and when you do different options.
Because there is no Central City Park plan that we've either costed or agreed upon at the moment.
Correct.
Or just a concept agreement.
Yes.
That there would be a park there.
Yeah.
How, when, and why, we don't know. So I want to be really clear about that, where the boundary sits. What are we discussing here and what are we not discussing here?
So the intention is to discuss what the different projects that came through in that cultural precinct master plan, which covers between Victoria on the River and the museum and down to the jetty. It's not looking at whether we do or do not do the Central City Park River Plan proposal.
But you're saying that potentially that could be woven into the...
So my suggestion will be that, well, what I'm proposing to do is that in amongst that, I'll be putting to you benefits, considerations and those sorts of things, and it's going to be amongst the elected members to work out how to what weight to put on those different factors.
Okay, and so any deviation, potential deviation, which might happen, you know, with the Goodwill of Council discussion, to the original river plan, the one we're all seeing in our mind, would then go out to the public because that was a strategic direction the public adopted. Is that where that might end?
Well, we'll get you to consider that at the briefing and discuss that about the direction going forward, taking into account the item in pink later on too.
Okay, well, I wasn't thinking about that in particular, but yes, I guess, yeah, that answers some of my questions. So this review is only as far as Embassy Park, so, but you, at least it says, it looks like that on number 3, Roman numerals 3, but you did talk about the back of the museum, the jetty and the river terraces?
Sorry, it goes from Victoria on the River, south to the museum and then down to the jetty. It's that...
Doesn't say that in the resolution, the staff recommendation, Roman numerals 3. It says to Embassy Park.
Oh, that's allocating $25,000 of the budget for Embassy Park path, yes.
Okay. And there's no budget for the rest of it, but you are going to review when the rest of it comes on board?
Well, that's the purpose of the conversation, is to understand.
So I will be able to see some costs of the work behind the museum and connecting the museum to Embassy
Correct.
Park as
yes,
well?
That's part of it, yes, absolutely.
But you won't be focusing, will you be focusing further on with the ecological terraces, potentially Grantham Street, or is that excluded?
The Ferrybank Development Plan, not at this point in time, but the master plan has some raising of the path at the waterfront between the jetty and a little bit further south, and that does have eco-terraces that go in with that. So there is some of that, but not all of the Ferrybank Development Plan.
So it's from the back of the museum through to VOTR, inclusive of the concept potentially of the Central City Park. The money's going to Embassy, the Embassy Park part, the 25,000. Have I got that?
It comes from that budget, yes, correct.
So that's what I've got. It's all correct, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thank you. So just as I understand it, the Central City Park and or VO, Victoria on the River, whichever title we give, either or both, that's not part of the River Plan Master Plan as it stands at the moment.
That's correct.
The only part of the River Plan Master Plan that we're considering here is that walkway, which links Victoria on the River to Embassy Park, which we kind of started on and approved during the last term when we had all the heavy equipment down there.
Yes.
for restapling the bank at Victoria on the River.
That's largely correct. It also extends from Embassy Park to connect to the front of the theatre at the moment with the design that that's what the master plan is showing.
Yeah, so that's my second question.
Yeah.
The connection is through Embassy Park to the theatre, or is the connection further along Embassy Park? And I'm just not sure because no one's seen the plans for the theatre yet, but I wondered whether the theatre would eventually take or be Embassy Park would become part of the theatre, or it would become the entranceway to the theatre. So I'm not sure about that. But
that talking about what the theatre and where they're connecting is probably a little bit beyond my remit. But the path that's shown within that master plan has it running along the front of, from Victoria and the River, the existing connection that is kind of stopped abruptly at Victoria and the River. It goes past the end of the steps that go down from Embassy Park, so it's right on the
where those units,
east.
where those apartments are.
Yes, along the front of those, and then it connects to the riverside of the theatre. And you'll see in the paper there that there's an option that the master plan shows, which has it at a height that kind of lines up nicely with the forecourt of the theatre.
Yeah. So that's further south of Embassy Park.
Correct.
Yep,
Yes.
okay.
And then that path in the master plan continues on to the museum.
Yeah, okay. So there would be some efficiency in deferring that part of it now, pending the plans for the theatre, so that there's an alignment between that connection from the river path or the pathway into the theatre. Is that what I read into the reason for deferring further work on that at this stage?
So to date, we've been working on a design which connects at the same height as they've got an entrance into the theatre from the riverside, and so the path connects beautifully up to that. But in July, they just changed the height, so we're back in redesign if we want to progress with that. So I'd rather just sit on it, wait until that's confirmed.
So I think Councillor O'Leary may have covered this, but in case I missed it, so if the report comes to us in August, we're in August now, aren't we?
Correct.
If the report from Momentum comes to us in the next month or so, that will put you in a somewhat more certain position of knowing where that entrance will be, so that that alignment can be done sooner or we can consider the alignment sooner rather than later.
We can, yes.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Yeah. The other consideration is how we pay for it, because we don't have enough money in the budget at the moment for it.
Yeah, okay. I wondered about asking that question as to whether that would be part of the theatre cost or a council cost, and that may be something I presume that you might be negotiating anyway at this stage.
Yeah, especially around the theatre itself rather than behind the apartments. So that's the conversation we're having with the theatre people. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
In summary, is it fair to say that there are so many moving parts at the moment that this is the most logical approach, and the moving part is being the final form of the theatre and other issues as well? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, so it's sort of like let that get sorted, the dust settle on that, and then obviously we've got a bit of a finance shortfall for that walkway, and then actually collect our thoughts after that as a council and where we want to go. And if council wants to achieve that pathway, to be blunt, you'd have to look at when and how we do that financially. And we all know our financial situation, and it might be that we might have to reprioritise another project, or we look for other partner funding as well. So I think you're right, there's a number of moving parts, and until a number of those have landed, then we can't move forward.
The critical point of timing presumably is when the theatre may be finally finished, in terms of, and is there a lag between theatre finish versus the pathway completion, for example?
Well, that's what we'll explore as well, and I think we discussed that at the briefing.
So the workshop will cover all that in a much more sort of appropriate way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Can we, I've forgotten what I was going to ask. Oh yeah, is there possibility of partner funding for this pathway? Like, have we talked to Momentum about it? Is it something that is?
I've spoken to Momentum, and they are quite keen to see us just look at the priorities together as well. So in that, separating the projects out and reviewing those and seeing where we can find funding. So in a nutshell, yes.
So we're talking with them about this?
We are.
Can you remind me where we're at with that funding request for the Tourism Infrastructure Fund and what that was for? It just seems like a long time ago now.
That covers the same area, so we may get funding for that. The response is due at the end of July. You'll notice we're in August.
Okay.
So it's imminent.
So, all right. So that's parked, and that's something that could happen and could help.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move the staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin. We'll go to debates. There is no debates, so we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
So, item 12, page 102. Thank you, Natasha, for the work you're doing on this. Welcome, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Mayor Andrew, councillors.
So we'll take the report as read. Is there anything you would wish to add?
No, but I'm open for questions.
Okay. Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Thank you for your good work here. I know it's taken some time. So, are we with this new memorandum of understanding? Will this bring us the opportunities for renewal of the way that Excite has been operating that we were hoping for? Because it's always been an amazing asset for the community, but we all agreed it needed to be kept current and kept operating at that very high level. So does this allow for that?
I do need to bring to the councillors' attention that over the last 3 years, the current management have invested a lot of time and effort to bring Excite up to a new standard. I think this reflects some visitation, which has literally doubled over the last 3 years. So what that does reflect is that there's still appetite in the community for science-related exhibitions. What we're hoping from the renewed relationship with Excite is that we can escalate that process further, acknowledging that interest in the community.
Excellent. Well, congratulations to staff for that result, Lance. Yeah.
And I think I went down there a few weeks ago myself because I quite like getting educated down there and actually fiddling with the stuff. It's not just for younger kids. I have to say I was really impressed with the work that Shree's team have done there, and she's getting that feedback too, and we're getting a lot of that on TripAdvisor too. So I think we're in a good place there, and it's quite interactive now, and it's really educational. There's obviously some other components we could add, and obviously we'll work with the Excite Trust around that, and I know they're reasonably buoyant too. So.
Well, congratulations to staff, because when I first came to this position, it wasn't.
Hang on, it's not debate. You have your chance to comment then. So moved by Councillor Dave, seconded by myself, seconded by Councillor Paula. Dave, would you like to speak to this?
I'm pleased it's finally settled in an amicable way. That's my speech.
Yeah, and I feel exactly the same. 3 years ago, I think we tasked you to go back and see what you could do to repair this relationship, and it appears you've got a result, so well done in a very difficult situation 3 years ago. Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
So now we'll go to item 7, page 20. Thank you, Jeff and Lance. Okay, we'll take the report as read. Anything you would like to add? And I'll just give an invitation to Mark here, who led this team, to also I just don't want you to get into too much detail because there will be a chance to debate, but I certainly just want you to say a few words as leading the task force, Mark. So hang on, we'll just start with staff first and then they'll hand over to you when you're ready. Or you can let Mark. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and thank you, staff, and thank you, staff from the previous term as well. This is the pointy end of a very, very long and exciting time in our evolution. It's an opportunity to establish a service that'll really get us back up on top of the councils in New Zealand. I can't reiterate enough what a long process it has been. It started well before my time with some excellent stewardship and guidance from the likes of Emily Botcher, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Gallagher and the team. Essentially what this does is the level of service aligns with the in the business case to the budget approved in the 10-year plan that we passed in June. Now, we need to be very careful in this our discussions here, and that there is still a fair degree of commercial sensitivity, to the point that we refer to the preferred supplier as the preferred supplier without dropping names out there, please, because it is right at the pointy end of this thing, and it's a lot of at the end of a lot of brilliant negotiation I see from the team here with our preferred supplier. It is quite important that we get this through. It is largely procedural, but by crikey, if there's any questions, please ask them, because this is it is a biggie. The tendered pricing expires on the 31st of August. So essentially, if it doesn't go through now, we've got a heck of a lot of work to do very quickly. So I'll hand it over to the staff. So thank you.
Nothing further to add on that. We'll take questions. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Fantastic report, and just acknowledge the work you guys have put into this. Just, I guess, and I appreciate what you were saying earlier, that there's so much uncertainty around this, so you're trying to deliver as much as you can. This is the first in New Zealand, so I guess there's a level of risk with that. On page 37, you talk about contingency to allow for some of it. At the top of the page there, contingency is built into the budget for small variations. Can you elaborate on what contingency? How much?
So, built in across the contract costs, we've built in 10% contingency.
So the total amount approved covers that contingency
Yes,
cost?
it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
On page 40 for us, you've got costs of sorting out at curbside, and obviously you can only go off other service providers, but what if that blows out? I guess it flows into my other question here. You've allowed for the bespoke type of operations because this is a new process with a lot of bins, and there's going to be a lot of areas where access, etc., is going to be difficult. And as I understand, you've allowed for 1%. What if that blows out to 5%, 7%? It's going to destroy that 10% pretty.
So we've done a good desktop assessment around the first initial current numbers, and we're pretty comfortable on that in terms of who's going to require a bespoke service up front. The risk is really around those future ones, which we have built in around the percentage growth, how many will grow as bespoke services. But we're obviously doing a whole separate piece of work to try and minimise that going forward in terms of we understand our current stock, but wanting to minimise the future stock that will require bespoke.
Can I just drill in a bit deeper there? How have you analysed bespoke?
So we have done a GIS where we've looked at where all our multi-unit residentials are. We've looked at where there are private roadways, where there's cul-de-sacs with private turnings coming off them, and looked at where there would be congestion that would cause a health and safety risk essentially to the contractor or to residents in Hamilton, and identified those number of sites across the city.
And that's only 1% across. What about for disabled or elderly or those sorts of things?
So those are the assisted services that we're going to introduce. We haven't defined exactly what that policy looks like yet. We'll be working with the task force and then bringing that to council. But we've put in budget for 0.5% of the population to receive an assisted service.
Okay.
Where they'll get their bins collected from the back door or from wherever on their property, and we'll have an agreement with them to go onto their property to do that.
Is that wrapped up as part of that bespoke, or is that?
No, that's a separate service.
Okay. You mentioned also that in future development consents and things, you're going to allow for this type of operation or etc. What's actually no, that might be saved for later. Actually, I think got that wrapped up in sensitive. Okay, I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you. I'm just on page 22, under the point 19, the 4 targets there for the waste minimisation plan. Will how will we measure those targets? Will that be somehow built into the reporting back from the preferred contractor?
Yes, it is
Yeah.
built into the contract reporting.
Okay, and I think the report spoke quite clearly to that, so thank you. I just wanted to check that. Question on page 22. Just point number 39, the recyclables collected at the curbside will be the property of the contractor and the responsibility for selling the materials will be their responsibility. Do we not have a responsibility, or will it be part of the reporting process that we know where they end up? Because
Correct.
of course we've heard all those anecdotal, well actually real life stories around the world of collecting at the curbside and ending up in a secret landfill somewhere. So will that form part of our contract and our reporting process?
It will, definitely. It forms part of the reporting process, and I can elaborate a little bit further once we get into the public excluded section later.
Okay, yep. On page 26, just down the bottom, under in the table there, fortnightly collection of rubbish. And the government has recently announced that the single-use plastic bags are gone burger, and I think that this government's indicated they're going to hit plastic quite strongly. Now, I just noted in the response, and this is working through, I guess, some of the concerns that are being raised, fortnightly collection of rubbish, etc. We've got the evidence from other councils with fortnightly rubbish is that if sealed in a plastic bag, nappies do not present a significant odour risk issue. So, my question is, is this plan and this contract flexible enough to be able to move quite quickly? Because there may not be in the near future plastic bags to put plastic disposable nappies in.
Yep, we've definitely built that in. And you know, with that one, it might be that they'd use a bin liner for it, because bin liners still will be purchasable. It will be the single-use plastics that are sold bags, at the checkout, that will be proposed to
I
be
guess
banned.
what I'm saying is I think that the government is indicating that there'll be movement further than single-use plastic bags.
Definitely,
So, and I know that I know nappies will go into the waste bin, but cross-contamination and all of those other things, smell and all of those things that I know the working group has been worked at, there's just got to be enough flexibility in A, the contract, and B, the waste minimisation plan to be able to address and move as quickly as I think the government might move in that area. Yep. Page 43. Page 42, just on some of the resourcing requirements for the contract. Can you just explain to me, so the top one there under 4.1, contract manager, so that's for the period required is for the entire period of the contract, so that's a HCC person, that's one full-time new staff member?
Correct, yes. Approved through the 10-year plan process.
Yeah.
Yep.
So all of those have been approved through the 10-year plan process, haven't they?
So the additional roles are the contract manager and the project manager.
Yeah.
And then the others are currently recruited.
Okay, all right. And final question, on page 51, in that attachment 2, you've got 51, 52 and 53, you've got some photos there of bespoke services. Are they just an indication of what the city has? They're not just the only 3 we have, eh?
These were used in the tender process to guide the proposed contractors in terms of what they would be looking for with bespoke services.
Yeah, so the different scenarios of housing, particularly high density, that we're going to have to deal with. Retirement villages aren't in here. And we, of course, had Netherville Retirement Village just recently come and submit to us about their situation. And I'm sure other retirement villages are different. So how is that going to be managed?
So again, they've been built into the contract as a special service that will be dealt with individually. So the contract manager with the preferred contractor will go out to those sites and work out the best solution for them.
Oh, okay. And will we be involved in that as well? In that
yes,
part
definitely
of it?
can be.
Yeah.
We can go through the task force and then...
Yeah, okay, all right, that's great. Very good report, thank you.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, look, without wanting to be repetitive, just picking up on Councillor Hamilton's point about bespoke services, number 36 on page 24. So, have you included in your costing basically all the kind of bow wave of developments that have probably been approved in the last year or two. That's all in there? So you've anticipated all of that?
Yep, we have anticipated, so we've been working with the relevant areas in council to understand what they look like and built that into our budget model.
Okay, so you're satisfied that,
Yes.
that's covered off. With the assisted collection service, I remember the number of people in the hearings who came in talking about their concerns there. We've got an estimate there based on what other cities have experienced, I see. How will we make a judgment on that, on who needs help and who doesn't? I mean, it probably sounds like a silly question, but I'm just...
No, we've definitely had consideration around that, and I guess it's, what policy looks like, and that's what we'll be working with the task force and also bringing to council around that policy. So
it sounds time-consuming to me in terms of the actual practice of doing all that.
It is, and there is a maximum number that the contractor will actually be able to provide. So we do have to work within the bounds of what is practical.
Yeah.
But what we'll do is put 3 different options to the task force to work through around what that looks like, that then we'll bring to council for decision.
Thank you. Okay. Great.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Most of my question's been answered. The one that remains is around the risk around the national waste levy and our flexibility to deal with that. Have you got any more, we all know it's going up. Have you got any kind of understanding from government about what that's going to look like or when that's really going to bite home?
We haven't yet. The latest indication from a recent meeting with MFE was around the fact that they're probably going to look at expanding it first. So it currently only applies to about 25% of landfills. So they'll look at expanding it to all landfills first before they look at putting it up. So that's the early indication at the moment, but there is no certainty around when they might look to put it up.
Okay. So the likelihood it's not going to bite in the first couple of years of this?
No certainty, but likelihood, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Thank you for that awesome report. I know it's been a lot of work. Just one quick question is there any more on the container deposit scheme happening, or is that still is it quiet, or is there something moving? Because waste is a moving target, and have you got anything, the latest
No
news?
words yet from central government on that. There is recently Waste Mins, which is the industry body for waste, which council is a member of, have recently set up a steering group around container deposit to really try and work with the government on where they're looking to. So we're influencing in terms of what would be the best outcome for council in terms of that. Okay. But yeah, no indication yet.
And that would of course change a little the pickup as well, wouldn't it?
There's potential depending on how they design it, yes, but we've also built in that sort of as a mechanism within our contract as well.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I had to pop out quickly before. Just the issue of, okay, you're going to bring back the bespoke services to us at the end of the year in terms of what they look like. That obviously will include identification of properties whereby they lend themselves automatically now to an in-service collection as against on the street because they have sufficient yard, and assume that's going to happen. Just picking up the Clean Streets project, and as I understood it, I just want to make sure you may have detailed this, the leeway in the contract were particularly initially when there's sort of chaos and mayhem of actually cleaning up litter, the contractor does that as against our guys going in after the event. You think that's sufficiently covered? You're happy with that?
We're happy with the position that we've got on that to make sure that anything that's spilt during the process will get collected. Yeah. So because the rubbish won't be out on the street in bags or the paper and cardboard or loose, it's going to mitigate quite a bit.
Yeah, we reduce the blowout. Yeah. I totally expect, and that's why I want Councillor Bunting to front this in 2 years' time, because huge, for 2 months, very challenging PR. But, obviously because it's a new system, but I'm thinking particularly for the high-density areas, the University Precinct, Hamilton East, etc. What are we doing with the, and I've raised this, the body corp managers, because this is kind of the carrot and stick that, you know, with the chips on the bins and all that, for the first couple of months, of course, you're giving leeway as when people take them out and take them back in, but after a while, then obviously I would argue that people have a responsibility to take their bins in within a reasonable time. And for the high density studio flats, ultimately that probably comes back on the body corp manager.
Yeah.
I think where we have some of the issues around containers being left out, etc., we'll have the ability within the solid waste bylaw to tighten up around those areas, and I guess it's the onus on the property owners or the body corps.
Obviously, I'm aware Christchurch and other cities, have had a whole lot of experience, and I'm thinking particularly what I call the Clean Streets project for high density. Are there any learnings from there, or I assume we're continuing to monitor, because obviously there'll be tons of initiatives and ideas?
Yeah, we'll continue to work with both Auckland and Christchurch, who have very similar models around how we roll out, especially the education around that rollout time, and working, as you say, with property managers. That's going to be really critical.
And I take it that obviously this contract still doesn't stop us having the idea with church groups and others of the inorganic, big, rubbish, inorganic collection stuff, that can be a separate project which our landfills and things can take anyway.
Yep, it can.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Yeah, just a question. On page 51 there, where you've got a little cul-de-sac, and according to my calculations, there's about 18 properties actually coming to the end of that cul-de-sac. Yeah. Would that mean that once a fortnight we're going to have 72 bins in that little part of the cul-de-sac?
No, that's the point of the bespoke service, is we will be looking at where we can either get shared bins or collection points where the truck will be able to go and collect them all from, rather than, because that would be a health and safety risk if you had all of those containers left out on that area. So that's part of working now operationally with the preferred contractor on what the best solution will be for them, for the residents, and for the contractor to be able to collect.
Yeah, don't want another Wellington bus sort of thing, do you?
No.
This food one, which is going to be collected once a week, I was talking to a guy the other day who does rodent control around the place, and he tells me that at the present time there's quite an increase in rats and that sort of stuff in the city area. Do you believe that this is going to assist that in any way at all? Reduce the rats?
So if people utilise this more than home composting, then it potentially could, because these bins are lockable. So with the lids, you put the handle down and it will lock the bin, so you can't actually get access to it if you're a rodent or anything like that.
If they put the lid down, yeah.
Wouldn't want to.
Or if you're hungry.
Yeah, don't do that.
Exactly. Okay. Time will tell.
Councillor Mark.
I'm just happy to move, and maybe Councillor Day would like to second it.
Yep. Hang on, we're not up to that. I'll keep that in mind, but Councillor James, I will be taking it, but Councillor James.
Thank you, and thank you for the report, guys. Just one question. Where is all our plastic going at the moment, and where will it go with the bigger collection?
So currently we're only collecting plastic 1 and 2, so there's still a pretty good market for 1 and 2. It's the higher quality and grade plastic, so that's okay. So for the current, in the future we are going to be collecting plastics 1 to 7, so there is a potential risk on that. The central government is doing a lot of work at the moment, so working with councils but also working with industry around what the onshore future looks like for managing those products. So really looking at the plastics 3 to 7 and fibre, because those are the two problem areas at the moment. So we really anticipate by 2 years' time, when this rolls out, that there will be onshore processing or secondary processing where they're able to create a product that they can then export overseas for straight going into a new manufacturing system. So it's not exporting waste as we currently see it. And we've also built provisions in, if that is not the case, we have got time beforehand to review what do we actually do, and is it worth starting that collection at that point in time.
Is there any indication that anybody's shown interest in starting up that processing in New Zealand? Or?
Yes, there's been a lot of interest, and the central government have received a lot of interest in their waste minimisation fund this year, just around plastics.
We've supported an organisation with that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Marks, seconded by Councillor Dave. and we'll go to debate. Councillor Mark.
Thank you very much, Mayor Andrew, and thank you, staff. It's my pleasure and privilege to hopefully move this through to the next stage or at this level. We have a lot to be grateful for as a bunch of elected officials, and that we have such a sublime staff who are not only enthusiastic about the environment but pragmatic about our council. And so I've been delighted to really ride this one through. I'm enormously grateful to Councillor Day for his support and for putting me into this position, because I knew nothing about waste and rubbish. I just thought it went into a green bin and disappeared into a magic hole somewhere, and I knew I should be doing better, but that was as far as I knew. And largely due to the enthusiasm of the team, I've become quite the waste junkie, and it's a little bit embarrassing to admit, but yeah, it's in a fascinating field. So thank you for translating it to me. Look, make no mistake, this is a massive project. I think we made the right decision keeping it in-house at this stage. We've seen the likes of Tauranga and other councils struggle with trying to wrestle the bull once it's out there with the user pays. They're trying to haul that in. So this will give us controls. There's a lot of exciting things that you'll see in the publicly excluded about the contract that the public will be able to see very soon after. So I just want to again thank the staff immensely, especially way back at the beginning with the brains of and the tenacity of Emily Botcher and her crew. And yeah, can't speak highly enough of the guys here. So yep, it's my pleasure to move it.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just want to add my voice of thanks to the staff on this, but also to Councillor Bunting for chairing this process in a superbly inclusive way. So I feel like I've been every step of the way along the journey, and I thank you for that opportunity. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because we know it's the right thing to do to properly deal with the city's waste, and we know it brings costs with it. But at the same time, we do know, especially those of us who did get down to the local government conference in Wellington, that waste is a very important topic in the local government sector, and the costs around dealing with waste are not going down, in fact, predicted to go up. We're a small country, and we are doing very well, and this particular council has always had a firm focus on waste, which is to its credit. But we do need to do this because we do need to do the best practice around waste, because otherwise it's just going to cost us more in the long run. And yes, we have to be a little bit brave here and go with something that's a little bit more costly, but I don't think we have any other choice. This is, in a business sense, the right decision. It's also ethically the right decision in the way that we look after our community and the environment going forward.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, look, I think staff have done a brilliant job on this for about 3 years too. That's happened, at least working out the project and the plan. My only disappointment is that it doesn't look like we're going to have Bunty's bins. We had thought we were going to get them for a while, but it hasn't eventuated. So I have to remove that joke from my list, unfortunately. Look, in 2000, I think it was, we decided to go with recycling, curbside collection for the first time here, and we were ahead of the game then. Problem was that after 2000, we rested on our laurels for 15 or 14 years before we decided that everyone else had got ahead of us, and we better catch up again. So one of the things I like about this contract is its flexibility, the fact that we can expand or change things as we go through. We've negotiated the ability to do that, and I think that's one of the lessons from the last contract, that we were sort of pretty much locked in there. If people had seen what staff first came to our working party under the last council with, which I think was something like 24 options, wasn't it? Different options in a huge, great spreadsheet. And then a whole lot of councillors wanted to add another half dozen or so options to that. They would have torn their hair out. That's why I've got so little left. But we got it. The fact that we've got it down to one, and one that's pretty widely supported, is great. And I think it's been a good exercise all round. And I particularly want to acknowledge also the Deputy Mayor for steering us away from starting this just before the new collection, just before next year's elections. Very smartly starting it just after the elections next year. Thank you, Martin.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and I just want to add to this, thank you so much to the staff. Fabulous job. I felt very privileged to be on that working party, and thank you also to our leader, Councillor Bunting. That was fantastic. I loved the photos with all the see-through rubbish and sharing pictures of rubbish bins, how exciting. But that's where it's all started, isn't it? And thinking, and I know it hasn't been an easy ride because the waste is such a moving target, and you never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. And I just congratulate you on foreseeing what could the challenges that could be coming towards us, and building in that contingency and that flexibility, because in 5 years' time, waste minimisation could look totally different, and we again, hopefully we're not behind the times, that we can move with the times as soon as something changes. So I'm really looking forward to the changes and to something that, and hopefully the government will pick it up and do something with the waste and really be a little bit more greeny than they've been so far. So it's I'm really looking forward to the future. And thank you very much for your hard work.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, applaud Councillor Bunting's leadership, and whoever is the mayor and council in the next term, I think close elected member oversight, portfolio allocation. I think this will be a special project for the political wing until it's totally rolled out, obviously with staff. Councillor McPherson made a very sort of interesting remark. Of course, I was not motivated by any things called elections and political issues, but I would say that we're doing this in a slow, calm, considered rollout, because we shouldn't underestimate the education and PR that's going to be involved. There will initially be a whole lot of fish hooks and all sorts of things, and anything of this nature, it's going to be, I think, quite massive. And so our comms strategy and our education is going to be very important. I'll be looking with great interest at the bespoke solutions, because obviously want to do that, and how do we look at other social housing providers, other major landowners, in terms of, you know, the on-site collection which we've discovered. Obviously, will be really interesting in the litter clean-up part of the contract, in terms of, you know, nipping sort of trends in the bud. The other thing which I think will be important will be, as our cities moving to a higher density ratio, with that has to come a whole review, and we're doing that. We have to be aware that the whole infrastructure changes. So, for example, with high density housing, you have a lot more bins, you have a lot more sort of concentration of litter. Now, obviously, some cities have been doing this for 20, 30 years, but the plastic bins in themselves will reduce a lot of the blowing paper and a lot of the rubbish, and that will be really good. But we do have to be aware of those bespoke solutions, because obviously what we want to achieve is good living in high density areas. So I certainly don't want to be going off to Cameron Road or some other place in Hamilton East and seeing a whole lot of mayhem, you know, with bins all over the place. So that's going to be a carrot and stick. Obviously it's going to be education initially, but I will say, and I've always said this, ultimately the property manager for those high density places is going to have to do their job. Ultimately there is that stick, but hopefully we don't get that far. But finally, I really want to commend when you invest in really good people who are at the bottom of the table and sitting behind you, who have a huge professional expertise, a lot of training, a lot of work, a lot of research, then you get, as an elected wing, some, I think, hopefully good outcomes. And thanking committee, and also one final good mention to Councillor Henry, because she's originally from Germany, which are streets ahead of us, years ahead. I found her contribution really useful, because she came historically from an environment where Germany, around a lot of the stuff in those countries in Europe, have been incredible. So I'm hoping we will emulate them.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, this has been a major piece of work which has spanned over a couple of terms, and no doubt has been in the mind of councillors and management probably for the last 15 years when the last contract was signed. But I've been impressed. Mark's committee allowed me to gate crash a number of times and sit in, and they even allowed me to speak at some of their sessions, and I did appreciate and did note with pride the degree of innovation both amongst the councillors and staff in terms of thinking through ideas, thinking through possible changes that are likely to happen, and thinking about how we could improve what is currently being done in the city. And I think too they were lucky too to have an innovative contractor, and I guess the proof there will be in the pudding in terms of how well the successful contractor delivers and how innovative they remain once the contract is up and running, and the challenges get presented to them. But look, it's been I think it's been a very successful journey, and if we go in with that, we're going in with our eyes wide open, and I think that there's opportunity here to keep that innovation such in place that we and hopefully our contractor will be flexible going forward to meet the challenges and the changes that will confront not only this community but the rest of the country. So thank you for your work.
I started off really opposed to this. I was torn apart over the affordability of this model, and on the other side being responsible to our planet and our future generations. And this all started back in those days, which might have been under the last trinium, with Emily Botcher grabbing me and taking me aside and working closely with me, and in the end working through for a model that, believe it or not, actually ended up being cheaper when you took into account the 20 cents that you paid for each black plastic bag, two per household. And this was outrageous for me, and I said she was wrong. And so they set up another meeting and a third meeting, and I came around. And I think this is an example of you having to have strong opinions, but having an open mind to listen and not just oppose because for the sake of it. My mum, and probably all of our mums, taught us when you make a mess, you clean it up. If you don't clean it up, you get a smack, or in those days you got a smack, and you still had to clean it up. And I think as adults it's no different. We make a mess, you clean it up. If you don't clean it up, you're going to get smacked around later on by the environment, and you're going to have to clean it up anyway. Back to Mark.
It's turning into a bit of a love fest, but rightfully so. I think this is a really great example. I think Councillor O'Leary put it really well. This is a great example of what happens when people work together really well. We've got brilliant staff. We've got a very enthusiastic bunch of councillors around the place. I'm grateful actually for Gary for the incredibly hard questions he's been asking. Well, it sets you a certain litmus test, and that's been very useful actually to us, because it means we haven't got completely out of control in a certain direction. And also, there was a poignant moment for me early in the piece when Paula was, as she does, explaining how plans work, and what the waste minimisation plan was and where it fits in the whole thing. And I think, largely due to your guidance, Paula, we got the horse back in front of the cart, just through no negligence or anything, just through timing. We put a lot of work into the waste minimisation plan. So now this contract actually is just a part of the bigger plan. Which I think, with this group of individuals in this direction, we're well served to carry out. So, happy to commend this to council, and let's get it over this hurdle, over one more hurdle, and then sign the jolly thing and make a real great difference to our community.
Thank you, Mark. Now we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Only to ask 400 questions.
Thank you for all you've done on this, working closely with the team. Thank you, Mark. We'll now move to item 14, resolution to exclude the public, moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for, any against, carried.